Alright, so boxers call out Dana White for being in over his shiny bald head. So from two shiny bald head men to another, clearly they have a problem with Dana White. Although I don't know why Fat Joe's in the mix. Like, why Joey out here? You know what I'm saying? Like, comment, and subscribe. This video is by ITP MMA Live. Let's go.
You in your prime, you would have been a UFC fighter or something like that.
It's your boy dwayzeonblaze.
And listen, the biggest UFC, 5 of the biggest UFC fighters combined couldn't match my pay.
Oh,
That's just it.
it wasn't worth the pay.
No, I want to be the biggest fighter, the biggest purse. I want all that stuff.
Yeah.
When Mike Tyson fights, he shuts everything down. The biggest.
The thing about this clip is that Mike Tyson and Dana White are pretty good friends. Like, Dana's appeared on Mike's podcast multiple times.
Pretty much everyone
On
bald.
Mike's podcast multiple times.
Everybody bald.
They do little skits together, and by all accounts they have a very friendly relationship. So the fact that Mike is openly calling out how little MMA pays its biggest stars in comparison to boxing really says a lot. And although I'm sure Mike didn't mean this as a personal attack, another prominent boxing figure did go on the offensive at Dana this week in the form of Eddie Hearn, who called him out for his unfair business practices. This is not the first, nor will it be the last time that a boxing promoter or even just a pro boxer has called out Dana for being a cheapskate, but I think it's for sure one of the most articulate and comprehensive breakdowns as to why Dana is going to have a very tough time transitioning into boxing. And whether it be Mike Tyson or Eddie Hearn or Oscar De La Hoya, all of these boxing figures agree that what Dana is doing in MMA is not going to fly in their world, and yeah, in this video I'm going to be talking about all this and more. Let's go back to what Mike was saying. I really think that this was a crazy thing for him to air out given his friendship with Dana, but I do admire him for keeping it real. He could have taken the diplomatic route and just lied and said that he would have loved to pursue MMA if it was around during his time, but instead he says that there's no chance that that would have happened given how little the UFC pays compared to boxing. Here's a little bit of context. Mike, at damn near 60 years old, made $20 million in that
Oh, that is true. That is true. The boxing does pay more than UFC. Why am I tripping, bro?
Fight against Jake Paul. And spoiler alert, there has never ever been a UFC payout that's even come close to $20 million. The most a UFC fighter has ever made, not counting pay-per-view points, was when Brock Lesnar fought at UFC 200 where he made $8 million. And even when it comes to the highest paid UFC fighter of all time, Conor McGregor, most estimates clock his total UFC earnings to be in the ballpark of $40 million over the course of 14 fights. But in one single night in the office, Conor made about $130 million against Floyd Mayweather. But guess what? Dana and the UFC pocketed half of that for basically doing nothing at all.
Conor was a good example. I always thought Conor would just walk away from the UFC, start up his own promotional arm of MMA, you know, and it's very interesting. I'd love to see the ins and outs behind the scenes of how that relationship was managed with Conor. You know, reports of when he boxed Mayweather, they went 50-50 on the purse, UFC and Conor. That's outrageous. Like, but it
should
was
be more, you're saying, for Conor, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Like, does it really seem fair for Dana to have made $65 million when the extent of his promotion was just him popping a blood vessel every time he had to introduce Conor? And let me tell you,
well, I mean, he is Dana White at the end of the day. There is no other Dana White, bruv. He's the one and only. So, does his value really have a price? I don't know.
this 50% shit might seem generous when it comes to Dana's standards.
Oh, my bad.
But there is no way he's going to pull actual top-level talent with that revenue split when he starts Zuffa Boxing in 2026. This guy's been paying UFC fighters 16% of the company's revenue for 3 decades now. Do we really think that he's going to be eagerly paying his boxers 60-70% of a night's total earnings?
Definitely
and on that
not.
note, I don't even get the vibe that Dana even cares all that much about being a boxing promoter anymore. I mean, we haven't even heard him talk about boxing at all since the Crawford-Canelo fight. We saw him get publicly bullied by the boxing media, and even the look on his face during the event wasn't really screaming enthusiasm. But
Man looks constipated.
to be fair to the guy, it is pretty apparent that he got pressured into doing all of this by the Saudis. They are very influential business partners to have nowadays, and I'm sure that a huge reason behind him going through all of this is to insert himself even more into their good books. Let's not forget that these guys quite literally bankrolled UFC 306 at the Sphere when Dana couldn't find a venue to host the event, so the more Dana gets in their good graces, the more he can leverage them whenever he finds himself in hot water.
The reality is this. The problem with the Ali Act for them is you have to disclose to the fighters the revenue of the show, particularly from the broadcaster.
Do you think that's what this is all about?
I mean, I think there's many different facets,
Okay.
but that is a major problem because they will be receiving a significant rights fee deal from Paramount. And when you look at what they're paying the talent, especially if you're in a league format, and I know the guys they've signed, they're getting 50 grand, 100 grand. I mean, like this kind of level, right? And when you're making millions in a rights fee deal, and the talent is getting such a small percentage, that's going to cause a problem. That's why you imagine that if the MMA fighters, the UFC fighters, could see in black and white on fight week the revenue that the UFC were making from the show, and then you turn around and go, I'm getting how much?
Honestly, for as long as I've been watching the sport, this thought has never crossed my mind. Apart from declining pay-per-view sales, this is for sure a huge reason why the UFC doesn't release pay-per-view numbers anymore. Back in the day, even if a pay-per-view did terribly, Dana would still announce what it sold at the post-fight press conference. I'm pretty sure the last
Dana's making too much coins now. That's the problem. Greed.
time he revealed pay-per-view numbers was UFC 264 in 2021, but since then it's become a relic of a bygone era. But what Eddie says here is on point. It is actually to the UFC's advantage to not reveal how much money they're making at each event, because keeping their fighters in the dark massively limits their negotiating power. I'm pretty sure that champions get notified how many pay-per-views they sell because they earn pay-per-view points, of course, but for everybody else, they have no idea how much money they're driving.
But you're going to have a situation where a boxer is making 3 or 4 times more than the main event on the UFC card, and the revenue is more for the UFC card than it is for the boxing. Do you know what I mean? And they can't afford for the talent to see the numbers. That's the truth of the situation. Because as we always say, you know, when we look at a P&L, 60,
Whenever the talent sees the numbers, they become very quickly unhappy.
70, sometimes 80% of that P&L of the revenue is going to the fighters. But in MMA, I think it's probably more like 20 or 30%. And you know better than me, if you've got a guy who's on an undercard, who's making $2 million, who you've never even heard of, and this main event UFC guy's making $1 million, doesn't the UFC guy go, I don't quite understand what's happening here. So I think it's a greater threat, potentially, to the UFC business.
First off, I think that Dana trying to reform the Ali Act is pretty fucking gross, but it's completely on brand for him to try and take something away that's genuinely good for fighters. But as Eddie says here, if let's just say Ilia Topuria makes $3 million to defend his belt against Justin Gaethje, but on the same night Zuffa Boxing pays some mid-tier fighter $5 million to beat up some can, you can bet that Ilia's
Why do
going to
they
be
show
asking
some other flippin' little people when they say mid-tier fighter?
questions, especially considering that there's no way Zuffa Boxing is going to be making as much money as UFC events. There is going to be a natural inevitability that UFC fighters will become unhappy at the UFC's pay scale compared to Zuffa Boxing. Dana really needs to be able to skirt around the Ali Act for when he starts Zuffa Boxing, otherwise every UFC fighter he has on the roster is going to be demanding to jump ship, rightfully so I might add. For Dana, transparency is already his biggest enemy, but the problem doubles now that he's going to be running 2 separate promotions.
Yeah, Dana's playing a dangerous game, bro, doing this.
That's the truth of the situation. The UFC guys are fighting without any understanding of how much revenue's in the pot. And these guys don't care because, and by the way, it's their business. They can do what they want. If they can get away with that model, good luck to them. But in that model where it's a league or it's a contender series and the guys are getting 50 if you win this fight and 100 and then 200, it's peanuts.
Something that people oftentimes bring up when
When people are saying 200 is peanuts, I know I'm broke, bro.
to UFC fighters who are making 10K to show and 10K to win is that they don't drive revenue for the business, and thus what they're getting paid is fair. But what about NBA benchwarmers who are playing 4 minutes a game and are making over $1 million a year? Are those guys driving revenue to the league? Same question goes for NFL, NHL, and MLB benchwarmers who you've never even heard of. Those guys don't generate a dime, yet they're taken care of because at the very least they reach the pinnacle of their sport.
Those guys are filling up the empty seats, bruv.
The UFC really is an honor. It's a stamp of legitimacy that you're able to compete with the best in the world. And I'm not saying that prelim fighters should be making 100K just to show up and get knocked out, but there has to be some sort of happy medium where these professional athletes don't need to worry about paying for basic necessities. How about this? Get rid of win bonuses and make the minimum payout for stepping into the octagon $30,000, which in my opinion is still too low, but that way if a fighter goes 2-1 in a calendar year, then they can at the very least afford to live and train still. The UFC is making $7.7 billion from the Paramount deal. Let's do some math. With the current ESPN deal, the UFC runs 12 pay-per-views a year at $80 a pop, and let's just say hypothetically all 12 pay-per-views sold 1 million buys, that would be $960 million, which is obviously a lot of money, but that's not even close to $7.7 billion. The UFC would only crack $7.7 billion if they sold 1 million pay-per-views for the next 97 events. Do not tell me that they can't afford to pay every single one of their fighters a living wage.
What do you make of Dana White entering the world of boxing and teaming up with Cheek Turkey?
Yeah, I mean, if they pay like the UFC, though, we might not like it. We might not like it, but
everybody in MMA wants to fight you, and everybody, Dana White can't stop mentioning
you. Well, I've always was taught this, when
what do you know, bruv? What do you know?
I'm in the $100 million business. Not the 100 not the $100,000 business.
Dana knows that the only way he can have any real shot at being a big success in boxing is to avoid the rules that are there in order to protect the fighters, which is why he's trying to reform the Ali Act. He's already tried to get into boxing before and quit before he even started because he realized that unlike the UFC, he can't go around blatantly taking advantage of people. This guy is literally Mr. Krabs. His success is built off of exploiting the passion of his employees. Of course, we've already seen a number of UFC fighters make the transition to boxing in order to chase the bag, but I really do think that this is only the beginning. As more fighters start to pursue their own best interests, it's only going to become more obvious that any UFC fighter that has a name can make more money if they just take that leap of faith. Guys like Darren Till and Mike Perry, who were never really the cream of the crop when it comes to MMA, have both stated that they're making way more money in boxing than they ever did in MMA, and I promise you that hasn't fallen on deaf ears to guys in the UFC. And unfortunately for Dana, it's a lot harder to implement monopolistic business practices in a sport that's over 5,000 years old. He's been able to control MMA because he was the first guy to do it, at least in the West, but as more UFC fighters start to wake up and realize that there are greener pastures elsewhere, the UFC might soon become a feeder organization to boxing. Hey, at least he has—
Dana will make a way. He'll find a way to rip them off, I swear.
Power slap. Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know your thoughts on what the boxing world has said about Dana White. Do you think Dana can go toe-to-toe with Eddie Hearn, and which MMA fighter would you like to see make the jump to boxing? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Well, yeah, man, at the end of the day, Dana's gonna have to pay up, bro. He's going to lose a lot of money. You know, I think we might see the first UFC strike. You know what I'm saying? Boys might go on strike because they're gonna want to know how much they're getting paid when they see their homies going over to boxing and making a hell of a lot more, and their lifestyle inflating 10 times more, even though they haven't really changed much as a fighter. So that's going to be interesting to see how Dana navigates that landscape. It is to me, it's a bad chess move. I think stick with your UFC. Don't get greedy. Don't try and take it all. Stick with what you know. Boxing might uncover, you know, open a can of worms there. It might open a can of worms, which a lot of people have been trying to open for quite a minute now. UFC fighters have been complaining and crying, yo, we need to get paid more. You know what I'm saying? Boxers are getting to that real bag. You know, even the unknown guys are chopping it up. So, you know, you guys let me know your thoughts down below. It's your boy dwayzeonblaze. Like, comment, and subscribe. Catch you in the next one.